Hello and welcome to the Federal Low Code Trailblazers podcast. This is season 2, episode 4, part of the ATARC Federal IT newscast. This episode will focus on building a low code culture. My name is Bill Bunce. I am an enterprise account executive with Pegasystems and the industry chair for ATARC's low code working group, which is a subset of ATARC's DevOps technology pillar. A low-code platform provides a factory approach used to collaborate, innovate, and deliver critical applications from one inclusive environment using a graphical user interface instead of traditional hand-coded computer programming. Our goal with this podcast is simply to meet with government and industry leaders who are leveraging low-code on real projects and better understand the challenges they're overcoming and the benefits they're realizing from low-code. My guest this month is John Smith, Consulting Solution Executive with Pegasystems. John, welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, John, can I ask you just, we'll kick things off here by having you introduce yourself and share your relationship with low code.
Sure. So as Bill said, my name is John Smith, and I'm a Consulting Solutions Executive with Pegasystems. So part of my role is to support our clients' implementation and adoption of Pega's low-code case management platform. So this includes scoping and sizing engagements, but it also includes staffing and training of project teams and kind of educating our partners and our clients on what an implementation and delivery team looks like in a low-code environment. And pretty much, whatever else is necessary to prepare them for what is usually their first introduction to the world of low code. So I've been with Pega for about 8 years, and prior to Pega, I was with OpenText and Metastorm, also supporting adoption and implementation of their low code platforms. And back then, it wasn't even called low code, so it's been a journey, I guess.
Gotcha. I appreciate it. And that's great background. If we try and define what is corporate culture, generally it refers to the beliefs and the behaviors that determine how a company's employees and management interact. A corporate culture certainly develops organically over time. You can't, mandate a culture. And it evolves from traits of the employees who work at that company. So I guess my first question, if we're talking about building a low-code culture, what should a low-code culture look like?
Sure. So to me, a low-code culture starts with empowering employees when it comes to making improvements to the business. Every single person in the organization should feel encouraged to look for ways to improve how business gets done. And good ideas should always be supported and rewarded by the organization. There's also a strong tie to the Agile design and delivery principles here. A lot of times things don't change in an organization because problems look too big and too intertwined with other problems to be fixed without massive wide-scale changes. But the fundamental concept of Agile is that you can break big problems down into smaller components and keep breaking those components down into even smaller components until you have something tangible that represents meaningful improvement and that you can deliver in a very short period of time. It's kind of, one of the fundamental tenets of Agile delivery.
Sure.
And in a low-code culture, this is happening all the time. Incremental improvements are always good for the organization as long as they're driving towards the organization's underlying goals and objectives.
Gotcha. There's a pretty famous quote from Peter Drucker that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So this implies that culture of an organization determines their success, regardless of how effective their strategy may be. If you walk into, or let's say you inherit a traditional software development culture, how do you evolve that organization into the low-code culture that you referenced?
Sure. Well, first of all, I completely agree with that quote from Mr. Drucker. Strategy is simply how you plan to achieve your goals, but that strategy can easily get pushed to the side if you're presented with a challenge that seems insurmountable with a given approach. As the old adage goes, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. But culture represents who you are, and you are who you are regardless of the hurdles and the challenges that you face. And that kind of, that's kind of where the culture, where we get to with culture, I guess, or why culture is so important. So in terms of evolving a company into a low-code culture, I think this starts by getting buy-in at the very, very highest levels of the organization and making sure that those leaders are communicating their support for this shift early and often to everybody in the organization. If leadership isn't 100% behind the move to low-code, it's guaranteed to fail. We've seen this over and over again for a very long period of time. And then everything has to flow down from that. The company needs to select a technology that supports a low-code way of life. Business processes and practices need to change to allow for a more involved and more dynamic workforce. And that workforce will need training and encouragement and proper rewards as they transition as well. It's not an overnight process, but it's one that any organization can make as long as they really commit to it.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more that I also have seen it many, many times that if you don't have management on board, you're probably doomed to fail. I also think, we can probably both agree that one of the key obstacles to digital transformation is the lack of engineers. So in that regard, low code, changes things a little bit because it brings into play, folks who traditionally were not involved in the software development process. According to some of the analysts, 80% of programming tasks or workloads, will be delivered without coding by 2024, which is not that far away. How important is it, do you think, to build your low-code team from people operating in those roles today, essentially turning people doing the processes today into your champions?
Well, honestly, Bill, I think it's everything. I think it's just the most important thing. Those are the people who really understand how business gets done, how business operates. Again, how it gets done at the very lowest levels of the organization. So they're frequently the best source for ideas and improvements that can ultimately save a business millions of dollars, or retain clients, or expand into new areas of business. It's really important to show those people that their roles aren't just going to be automated away. That's a constant concern when you're talking about low code and automation. People are always worried about having their job be automated away, and they'll find themselves working themselves out of a job. So it's really important to just reassure them and that they're valued. B, that automation does not mean that they're going to lose their jobs. It's going to mean that they can spend more time focusing their day on more important and more valuable and more interesting things. And again, that they're,
which sometimes could just be more time at home with the family.
Absolutely, absolutely. Getting rid of some of the 10 and 12-hour days that people are frequently still working. And then it's important to show them that their ideas and suggestions are going to be heard and rewarded by the organization.
Right, and can be implemented quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So adoption of new technology, has always played a big role in many business success. When business leaders leave their comfort zone to embrace new ways of doing business. And you talked about getting management on board, but why do you think low code is often considered still a new technology when, you and I have been in this low code space for, 20 plus years?
That's a really good question, Bill. I remember asking myself, myself and coworkers asking each other the same question 20 years ago about business process management and business rules management platforms, which by the way, still have not been fully embraced and adopted across government. So I think there's a lot of reasons behind this, and to name just a few, low code technology has been around for a long time, but most of that time, low code has just been a buzzword. It hasn't really had a lot of meaning or definition behind it, or those meanings, it could mean different things to different people. I think it's just fairly recently that low code platforms are getting to a point of maturity where they can really start to deliver on the low code promises that they've been making for a long period of time. Second, I think government is inherently resistant to change. Leadership is unwilling, or they believe they're unable to do something that's fundamentally new to them or to the organization. And also end users are generally happy with the status quo. And we see end users pushing back on change fairly often. And then finally, I think I honestly think government's contracting practices get in the way of this sometimes as well. The government is still awarding these big monolithic contracts, the same huge monolithic contracts that they've always been awarding. They're not demanding change from the system administrator community. And I think that's a big driver here as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, we could try and hold the right people accountable, but so many challenges in that space. Budget is a big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
They get their budget, at least the last 5 or so years with continuing resolution. You don't get your budget till the year's half over, and then you've got half a year to spend all your budget. So in that amount of time, how do we plan for new technology? And we just got to figure out how to do it. So there's
but the way we do the contracts need to change, and the way those contracts look needs to change. And I think that culture needs to be established. And we talked about that earlier, how business processes and business practices need to change from top to bottom for this to really work.
Yeah.
And that's not happening. A lot of things are just still being done the way they've always been done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see Agile being adopted, but not the wide scale, changes that you're talking about.
They're adopting Agile as well as they can, given the constraints that are put on them by the organization or by other business practices or processes or policies in the organization. It's always doing the best you can. I mean, we've been saying this a long time. You be as agile as you can be. We advocate that to our clients all the time. And at Pega, we take a Scrum approach to everything that we do, but we know that most of our clients can't do out of the box Scrum, what true Scrum looks like. So again, I can't tell you how many clients we've encouraged, just be as agile as you can be. And then if you can make improvements to that over time, great. But the best any move towards Agile is a good move.
Right. If we look at the arc of technology adoption, obviously Jeffrey Moore's book Crossing the Chasm was all about where the adoption of new technology, and he lays out innovators, early adopters, the majority, and then the laggards. Finally the laggards. Mm-hmm. Where do we see government in low code adoption today, or where do you see?
Sure. So I have not read that book, but I did, look it up a little bit and just try to educate myself a little bit. And my understanding is that Mr. Moore kind of split the majority phase into an early majority and a late majority.
Right.
And to me, government by and large is in that kind of early majority phase on that life cycle. It's pretty rare, I think, to see true innovators or early adopters in government. It's not that you never see it, but I just think it's fairly rare. And there aren't enough people willing and able to take the risks necessary to be those, innovators or early adopters. But at this point, I do think the technology is mature enough and proven enough that we're starting to see agencies taking a real look at how they can benefit from low-code technology. And we're seeing some who are doing so with a lot of success.
Agreed.
But it's not all, it's not really widespread. I'm not sure it's gained critical mass. There's still a lot of leadership who don't understand it well enough, who don't believe in the technology, don't believe the technology is established enough to really make a commitment. So like I said, I don't think we've gotten to that point of critical mass where the late majority folks are starting to jump into the field. So yeah, I would kind of put government in that early majority phase.
Yeah, I know that you and I often talk about mission critical applications like the census or IRS, or Social Security, NBIS, and so on, where there were management that saw the value of speed and made the commitment for those mission critical. Now, often those were full-blown RFPs, which took multiple years. I think the Census, for one, did a great job post-award documenting why they made the selection. And, hopefully tools like that will flow down and we'll see others begin to adopt tools like low code.
Yeah, and the client. I mean, you kind of mentioned that there. The clients that I've seen be the most successful, and you talk about census, you talk about NBIS, you talk about, it makes me think about New Jersey courts, for example, on the state side.
Yeah.
You know, they've been very successful with the low code, approach. They've been very successful with an agile approach, and pretty much every one of those cases or every one of those projects, you've got people at the top who just are saying, "This is the way we're going to do this."
Yeah,
And
there was more than likely one person
right. Yeah,
who
it's
said, I'm gonna put my job on the line,
yeah,
and
and
we're
it
gonna
goes back to that commitment. You know, you got to have that
yeah.
commitment of leadership just to say, this is what we are going to do. So everybody better get on board. And it can be painful in the beginning to make a radical shift like that, but they reap major rewards from that down the road.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the CIO. It doesn't have to be the chief data officer. It doesn't need to be somebody with a C in front of their title. I've seen many captains and majors and colonels have a big impact on a program's way forward. So
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
well, transitioning to a low code culture, isn't going to be smooth unless the organization, is ready to take that step. So, we've been talking about, that you need a champion and so on, but adopting a new platform, will mean that you have to train your staff on how it works. You need, possibly restructuring because, traditional software, if you're not doing Agile today, if you're implementing low code, you want to do Agile at the same time, as you mentioned. What else? Or can you talk about, what are the steps to, building a successful program, and in doing so, kind of changing the culture?
Yeah, so training on the platform for sure. Select a platform and then get the training on the platform for the whole team, and across all different roles. It's not just the developers, it's not just business users, but it's also product owners, and it's project managers, and business analysts and business architects. Everybody needs to understand the technology to some degree, and everybody needs to be speaking the same language. Absolutely, training on the platform is very important. I talked earlier about that close tie with Agile delivery. So I think in addition to platform training, I can't recommend enough that Agile needs to be a part of this for every single client that's doing a low code journey. And I think that the teams need training in an Agile delivery approach as well. So not just platform, but also that Agile methodology. There should be a lot of emphasis in support for collaboration between the different areas of the business, especially between business in IT, but really across the business. That collaboration, it allows for a sharing of ideas and changes around the organization, and helps ensure that improvements in one area don't have negative improvements in other areas of the business. And again, kind of make sure that everybody understands what everybody is doing. Again, having support for and encouragement for collaboration across the business, I think is always really, really important. And then looking forward, you may actually consider changes to your hiring processes and your compensation, packages, how you compensate your employees. We want to bring in people who are willing and able to think broadly about how they can improve the business using the low code platform. And we want to reward them fairly for doing so. And of course, I don't mean firing your workforce and starting with a whole new one, but over time, just change kind of the model of the people that you're looking for, to focus on more of that process improvement mindset, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree. When we say less code, that does not mean no governance. Talk to me about implementing a DevSecOps culture or a DevOps culture in parallel with a low code culture.
Yeah, what you said is definitely true. In fact, less code often translates to a need for more governance rather than less governance. You end up having a lot more cooks in the kitchen, if you will, and things can be moving a whole lot faster. So there really needs to be a strong and well-defined governance structure around things. So I think DevSecOps is a natural fit with a low code culture. It's probably even a necessary fit. Incorporation of DevSecOps should be part of the shift to low code. By implementing the two together, it becomes one big holistic shift that the organization is making at one time. And I really think that's easier to plan and adopt than trying to do them separately, or maybe bring DevSecOps in after the platform has been established. I think it's important to do it at the same time because they are intertwined.
Yeah. Well, adding low code also needs time to adjust, and meld with your staff before it is, accepted as a natural part of the workplace. How long does it typically take to build a low code culture? Is it one project? Is it, multiple projects?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors in play that can influence this. It's I never like to answer a question with "it depends," but sometimes
Often it depends.
So things like from commitment of the leadership that we talked about several times already, to the willingness of staff to adopt the changes. Sometimes you get staff that just doesn't want to do it, and you put a few key people in places and who decide they don't want to adopt something, and it can derail or at least slow down just about anything. So that the quality and capability of the platform or platforms that you choose plays into that. And then the culture that's in place prior to the shift, I think can really play a big impact as well. If you've, for example, I guess if you've already brought Agile in and have made Agile an inherent part of the culture of your organization already, which some have, then it might be a much easier shift to bring low code into that than for companies who have never even started down an Agile journey either. So again, there's a lot of factors at play. For most organizations, I suggest this is probably a journey of maybe 1 to 2 years, but it can certainly be less than that for some organizations, and it could be more for others. That said, most of what's needed to do this is already present in the organization. And remember that one of the core ideas of low code is to put responsibility for business improvement into the hands of the people who know the business best. And those people are already there. So you just need to add in a tool or a platform that kind of facilitates that, and then encourage and enable and empower those people to use that platform and adopt that platform. And none of this happens overnight, of course. We're talking about the time. So it's all about incremental improvements and making slow but steady progress forward.
Yeah, gotcha. On our, I don't know if you listened to our podcast, but on our last podcast, we discussed manufacturing low code talent, including, hybrid teams and melding business users together with citizen developers and traditional developers to build out the team. How important do you think diversity is in building your low code culture?
Well, I think it's enormously important. We talked already about the collaboration required between business and IT and leadership and other stakeholders throughout the organization. Bringing in a true low code culture, I think, requires tight collaboration across the entire organization. So that means that these teams, the teams become much larger and have a wider type of resource or type of person in it or in them. So they do become very, very diverse teams. Low code does not mean the elimination of all code. Building a complex enterprise class scalable application is always going to require some degree of coding. So, the key to getting the most out of your low code platform is to have business users and citizen developers who are working together in concert with the traditional developers. Let the citizen developers build the business parts, such as the user interface and the business processes and the business rules, and then let the traditional developers step in when it comes time to building out the complex parts, like the data sources and the integration points to outside systems and that sort of thing. And while you're at it, take advantage of secure and scalable cloud infrastructure so you can offload a lot of that effort and focus on your business. But again, having those business users and IT users working together in these diverse teams is what's really creating a lot of value and making a low code environment, low code platform, low code culture effective for our clients.
Well, this has been great, John. I really want to thank you for taking your time to meet with us here today, for your insight. I think it's been very helpful. Until next month, when we have another conversation with a government trailblazer on the use of low code in government. My name is Bill Bunce. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill.